I'm John Hoskins, and I'm the co-founder of Advantage Performance Group, and currently still involved with Advantage, and live in Scottsdale, Arizona. Well, I think we talked today about my time at Xerox Learning Systems, and the concept that was always driven into us at that time was that you could pretty much turn anyone into a salesperson with the proper amount of training, proper amount of coaching, etc. And I believe that. We were taught in basic school all about Mr. Skinner and getting the chicken to peck at the corn and reinforcement, etc. And I've done a 180 on that in probably the last 5 years. Totally discarded my thinking around that, and truly believe that most talent is innate. And someone is probably pretty much wired up as to who they're going to be by the time they're about 6. And so you either are one or you're not. And if you are, you can certainly get better at it. And there are gradations of good and great. But if you're not, all amount of training and coaching and cajoling and compensation and rewards and recognition probably isn't going to move the needle in my book. So for a guy who's been 35 years plus in the training industry, I guess I could be accused of malpractice. And you say, well, how did Bob make his fortune? And you go, oh, well, Bob did this or that, and you go, wow, Bob just didn't seem that much different than me. How come that didn't happen to me? I think sometimes people fall into situations where it's more the deal that makes the guy than the guy making the deal. But a big part, I think, of most people's success in business world anyway has to do with innately, do they have leadership skills? Can they get other people to follow them? And if they transition from one organization to the next, do the skills they have around that translate well to that new culture? So that, to me, very important thing. Who do they surround themselves with to help them reach the vision, the mission, and where they're going? On the motivation side, another 180 since my Xerox days. I used to believe that managers did motivate people. I'm now aware that most motivation is innate, it's internal, and you can create, I think Andy Grove mentioned this in his book about Only the Paranoid Survive. He said you can only create a culture in which people are either motivated to perform or not. And so the role of the leader really is, what is that culture that you're creating, and does it play to the things that innately that person brings to the job? When you're a consultant, a lot of times you're brought into companies that aren't doing so well at these things, and part of your value proposition is coming to them to say, what is it that we can do to help you, move the needle and get this organization to world-class status? Obviously, the whole strategic engagement part, trying to get all, I think Scott McNeely coined the phrase, he said, all the wood behind the same arrowhead, getting people moving in the same direction against the same goal, same vision of where we're going as a company. That's certainly important. To that point, I think in a lot of organizations that I go into where it's sort of floundering, or it's just not where it needs to be. What's missing is some connection to the overall vision of where the organization wants to go, and the values of that organization seem not too explicit. Whereas in organizations where I see it really working, and a lot of our work is often about communication of the strategy to all employees, is getting that engagement at the lowest level. Johnny Overhaul's on the shop floor, who actually, I think of my early days at Advantage, one of our first customers was Glen Ellen Winery. And Mike Benziger, who he and his 8 brothers and sisters, took that over from the father and mother, and really built an organization that ultimately they sold to Hubeline for, I think, $115 or $20 million. And Mike had a great leadership style in getting all people within the Glen Ellen Winery engaged in the mission of the organization. And the mission was on the back of every one of their business cards. But you could go into the vineyards and you could ask a guy who was picking leaves off of grapevines, what's the mission of the Glenellen Benziger family winery? And they would tell you, it's just to exceed expectations and have fun doing it. And you know, that one always stuck with me because obviously they built a great company from 0 cases of wine to over 500,000 cases of wine sold annually, and did it all on a shoestring, and you know, did it, I think, with a lot of great leadership.